It's the birthday boys. Oh yes, it's the birthday boys. We're shitting in our diapers 'cause we're only 2 years old. It's the birthday boys.
Yikes. Happy birthday. I guess.
Happy birthday to you too, Cleveland. Happy birthday to all of us.
Yay.
Because against all odds, we've been doing this thing for 2 years. Well, 1 year for Cleveland, but you started pretty much right after our birthday episode last year.
That's right.
Went from regular guest to full-time featured player.
Yeah, now I'm running this shit.
Full-time host. We are the Pod People, and I'm Matisse Van Rossum. Or am I?
Well, I'm the communist agenda Ben Sheets.
Nice. And I'm Cleveland Mosier, and I'm not mad, I swear.
Well, on the subject of madness, our birthday bash is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And tonight we're talking about the 1956 version, based on the magazine serials, I believe. I think there were maybe a comic strip or something. I did see that it was based on some sort of written publication.
Based on the actual Cold War.
We'll get into that in just a minute.
Excellent.
The film is directed by Don Siegal, director of other classics such as Dirty Harry and Escape from Alcatraz, big Eastwood collaborator. The film stars Kevin McCarthy, Dana Winter, Larry Gates, and King Donovan. What a name.
So, Tease, why did we pick this movie for the anniversary episode?
Because it's where we get our name from.
What?
It's a movie about pod people.
It is? How?
I'm getting to that.
Cool. I can't wait to find out.
The film is about a small-town doctor who learns that the population of his community is being replaced by emotionless alien duplicates, i.e. the pod people, because they come out of big ol' seed pods.
Wait a minute. People from pods?
That's right.
I don't get it.
You will by the end of the episode.
Cool.
Let's set the stage for this film. It's 1956. World War II has been over for 11 years.
Hey, I get it!
But a different kind of war is beginning. A Cold War. The Cold War, even. This film is basically the quintessential anti-communist film.
Oh yeah, it is all up in some zeitgeist.
We've talked about it a lot on the show. A great way to analyze what people were afraid of at any specific point in history is to watch their horror films. And this film preys on the fear of the Reds living amongst us. They could be anybody. Your neighbor, your wife, even your 2-year-old son could be a communist.
Yeah, you just don't know.
And you'd never know, because they look like you, and they talk like you. But they're kind of dead behind the eyes, aren't they?
They have no emotion.
They have no emotions. They strive for uniformity in all things.
Yeah,
things like love, beating your wife, sleeping with your secretary, drinking martinis. None of that. No communism.
No, they're not even
gas
people.
in the basement.
Since everybody was afraid that their best friend might be working for Stalin, it makes sense that they would make a horror film about a mysterious alien threat that is insidiously planting itself in a community and growing and flourishing and replacing all of the normal people with emotionless, boring, communist aliens.
Yep. And if Tolkien's orcs and the zombie fads has gone on to well-establish, people love an other in their pop culture.
They certainly do. I mean, especially in horror. Horror is just about always the fear of the other. Until we get into the 60s, where it sort of turns inward, and it becomes about the fear of the monsters living among us. Which this film is actually an excellent precursor to sort of like the serial killer pop of the 60s.
Here's an interesting thing. I definitely see this movie as very influenced by the Cold War. However, I do want to unpack that a little bit because I think this movie definitely plays into Cold War paranoia, but I don't know if I would necessarily call this movie anti-communist.
In the sense that it has no overt anti-communist propaganda. They never say the word communist. Joking aside, it's not about the communists.
Because it's very metaphorical, and I think
it's a metaphor.
Definitely in the times, it was supposed to be about the communists.
Well, it was preying on the fears of the communists.
The fear of the Red Scare.
Exactly.
That was so active. And
a big part of Hollywood at this time,
well,
too.
yeah, with McCarthyism and the blacklist,
you
know. Nowadays, I would extrapolate this idea more to kind of being about conformity and the fear of losing your individualism.
Well, I think that fear kind of goes hand in hand with like the general fear of communism.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
it's like the aliens operate like as a collective.
I think what Ben is saying is that in the modern era where fear of communism is not really a thing anymore, like you have some old boomers who are still scared of communism, but like it's not really a fear anymore. You know, we're out of the Cold War. Nobody's worried about nations becoming communist and rising up against the United States.
I mean, maybe you're not, but my bunker says otherwise.
If I'm wrong, then I'll come to you.
Oh no, I'll be well shut at that point. Build your own fucking bunker.
Damn, fair enough. But today, when the fear of communism is not really relatable anymore, the film is still relevant because for the people of the decade, communism was synonymous with conformity and lack of individuality. So the themes ultimately transcend what they came from, and I think the film is still relevant.
Oh, absolutely.
No,
Yeah.
I'll give you that. Like, that is sort of the beauty of an other or any of your just like open-ended analogs, is that as the times change, its commentary might change, but it can adapt to
Right.
it. Like any good classic should be capable of not necessarily dating itself. Now it can be like you have a period piece that doesn't date itself, but
Right. A successful film will always be good. It doesn't matter how old it is or when you watch it. That's the sign of a bad film, is a film that dates itself so severely that it will have no context in the future.
yeah. At that point, it's only saving grace
like
as
the
its
Emoji
charm.
Movie.
What
I mean,
movie?
there's plenty of movies of this era of the 50s that do not age well, you know, that are more explicitly anti-communist.
Sure.
That just don't work. One of my favorite examples of this movie is even still well regarded by most today, so this might just be a contrarian take on my end. But On the Waterfront is considered a classic. But if you look at the subtext of it, it's about like snitching on your fellow man and busting unions. Like, it does not work thematically today.
It probably depends on your politics.
True.
I agree with you. That's the kind of rhetoric that I don't want in my films, but I think there's plenty of people who are
Right.
absolutely...
It's like I would like to believe that like the fountainhead is irrelevant now, but there's plenty of people who disagree.
Here's a universal example. Birth of a Nation.
Thank you. Good call. Or yeah, and again, once again, God, I hope universal.
Much more widespread, I think.
Yes,
well-
that's a better example.
Unfortunately, yeah. Well said. Yeah, that film is pretty universally dead,
Yes.
and as it should be. I don't think I'm making a big political statement by saying that.
No, I don't think that's a hot take.
Yeah. Wait, I shouldn't be praised for saying Birth of a Nation is a bad film? Where are my applause?
I mean, D.W. Griffith felt so bad about it that he made Intolerance right after, which is an even longer film about how being racist is not cool.
Oh, well, there you go. I think the damage is done at that point.
It has people in yellow face through most of it.
Oh, no.
It does, but back in those days, people didn't think that was racist.
No, exactly.
Doesn't make it not racist.
Wow, we've diverged drastically.
Worthwhile, I think.
Let's get into the meat of this film a little bit. I want to talk about the style, because I think stylistically it's very much a noir film.
Yes, visually.
Yes, 100%. Considering the subject matter too, I think it fits. You gotta have all these deep shadows and moodiness, and there's a mystery to be uncovered and illuminated. And this mysterious threat hiding in the dark.
On top of that, too, from a writing perspective, we have the absolute gift that our protagonist is a doctor. I loved that. I wasn't expecting that going into this film. I was expecting him to be sort of an everyman. And the fact that we have someone who is trained in deductive reasoning, who isn't just a fucking detective, is great. I always gush over like the use of like scientists and doctors as protagonists in films. You just usually glean a little bit more.
It's a big trend of science fiction horror. The protagonist often is a man of science for that very reason. And I agree with you. I think it works great, especially because as like the doctor in this small California town, part of his job is that he knows these people.
Oh yeah, it's
like
perfect.
They're familiar to him. The idea is that like the pod people are indistinguishable from real people, except there's like a lack of true feeling that you can kind of tell in interacting with them. So you wouldn't know the difference if they weren't people that you knew. So having him be the town doctor who knows everybody, he's more keyed into unraveling the mystery. That being said, he is a very annoying skeptic for a long time in the movie.
Yeah, like fortunately he is regretful of that in his monologue, and that's I see that as a saving grace.
Well, and I mean,
that's part of the fun of any horror.
As a scientist or doctor, you know, he's supposed to be
he's
man
trained
of
to be
reason,
skeptical.
You know, like that's a character I would expect to be more skeptical than others.
Oh yeah,
and
like,
the everyman.
I think it's fine for the purpose of the story. That being said, it does get a little bit tiresome when all of these characters, who are pretty much exclusively women for the first part of the film, are coming to him and being like, hey, somebody, you know, my uncle or so-and-so is not them. You know, they're not who they say they are. And it's like, you're just hysterical. You know, there's a little bit,
that's also
little bit too much of that.
One of the really great things, and it's a wonderful, like, time capsule piece of commentary on how doctors were kind of also therapists in the 1950s.
Also how they treated women, you know.
Well, no. And that goes hand in hand with that. Like the doctors, like people saw like therapists and shrinks as kind of scandalous. Like you didn't seek out mental help. You went to your doctor about it casually. In particular, like that was, you know, like a huge problem with like housewives and such. Hence, like Mother's Little Helper and whatnot. And no, I love that kind of crops up as a theme in this film. Like, and there's commentary on that.
Yeah,
and it's cool. It's very relevant.
No. I like that because he does play the role of therapist for a lot of people in the town.
Yeah, as doctors did then.
My point is how many times also does he sedate a hysterical woman in this movie?
Well, no, that's the commentary. Is he's playing therapist for this town, but that's not his job. Like, and that shouldn't have been the doctor's job, which is why he does a poor job of it.
At the time in the culture, it was their job.
I know, and they did a terrible job of it. I agree with you fully. Like he does it horribly because they did.
But I agree with you. Having his voiceover narration being regretful for being sort of blind to the threat does help that a lot.
Well, it's such a classic like way to frame and to set up like a foreboding tension. I mean, like you see it in all like hallmarks of horror. Like Stephen King does it a lot.
It's a classic of dramatic irony where the viewer knows more than the characters right off the bat.
Or just also that like the narrator has a sense of regret and they use that expression to foreshadow what's coming and to say like, oh, you know, if only I had known, then that horrible night wouldn't happen. Ooh, what horrible night are they talking about?
Yeah,
now I'm intrigued.
It's that kind of dramatic irony that makes it work, which is exactly what you're talking about. Going off that as well, the whole structure of the film, the script especially, is very economical. There's not much fat on the bone at all. It's a brisk 80 minutes. It definitely is all plot.
Yeah, it feels well paced.
You know,
it doesn't start too fast.
All the fat's been trimmed.
I think having him as a doctor who knows all the town helps too, because you have less concern with introducing characters and stuff
Yeah.
like that, especially character relations, because he already has established relationships with most of the main cast of characters. I do think this movie is almost too economic in that I almost feel like it needs a bit more time to breathe at times. Because it's so point to point that you kind of lose a little bit of the horror. You don't really get to see the effects of this on the characters as much.
Once they find the body of his friend Jack, the pod person that is sort of incomplete, once they hit that moment, it picks up pretty fast and keeps it like a gallop for pretty much the rest of the movie.
Yeah, the rest of the movie is excellent. Plot point to plot point. It's excellently structured and paced.
What I would have liked to see a little bit more of in the beginning that I think sort of goes into what you were saying is I think it would have been nice to have him interact with a couple of more people that were a little bit off, for us to see that a little bit, but for him to, brush it off too, rather than just like people coming to him and being like, so-and-so is not them. Is like, well, I talked to them and they're fine. I think I would have liked to see a little bit more of people behaving in a way that sort of keys us off that something is wrong, even if he himself ignores it.
I think the problem with that is we already have an issue with the protagonist sort of brushing things off for too long. I think you brought that up earlier, and I feel like we'd like the protagonist less. I think
it would make him. You think it would make him seem more stupid?
Correct.
Though I think you could do that in other ways. Just give a little more to the audience without giving it to him specifically.
The struggle with that is that he's the narrator, so we wouldn't really be seeing things that he wouldn't.
But even if we saw parts of the pods going about,
something like that.
I don't know. Yeah,
I think that would be cool. Like if he was going downtown and saw something strange in the back of a truck, but doesn't think anything about it.
It's not a big deal unless it has context,
Okay,
taking some of the context out and foreshadowing that might have worked.
Yeah, so then there's the realization later is like, oh, fuck, I saw these earlier. They're moving these around.
Well, one of the most interesting things about the production of this film is originally it was supposed to have a way bigger budget. If I remember correctly, it was supposed to have 6 or 7 times the budget it had.
Wow, really?
It was done on $500,000 budget. The shoot time was cut down to I want to say 4 or 5 days. It definitely forced them to be more economical with what they shoot, and it probably limited some of what they wanted to do, but mostly I think that works to its advantage. I mean, this film.
Under those constraints, you wouldn't think that from watching the film. It doesn't feel rushed. Like you said, there's very little fat on it, and there are places where it could breathe a little bit more. But I think that the film itself is very tight.
I think those limitations force them to be more subtle in a lot of ways. I wonder if it was a bigger budget, it would have been less subtle with some of the pods,
some crazier
because
stuff.
we get that awesome sequence of the pods forming humans
in the greenhouse.
But that's just
great.
One little sequence. And I'm glad that it wasn't more in the film, to be honest.
No,
I think you're right.
That's what I was exactly where I was hoping we'd head. I actually, if I wanted anything differently from this movie, it would probably be seeing the pods themselves less during the film. Not the sequence where they come out of the pods. I think that's quite good. But as a prop, I had kind of a problem with the pods. They're rough.
I actually kind of disagree. I think they're pretty decent for their time. And
I think they look good. The problem is
there's no weight to them. And they throw them around like inflatable footballs. And it really makes them feel artificial.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
They handle them really hardly.
They feel super lightweight. It doesn't feel like they actually have any mass to them.
Yeah, they feel like props. It's problematic. And also I feel like the way that they're just carting them around, in the trucks and whatnot, which I do like, but
I love
I
that.
wish
Yeah, I
I
thought
wish we'd seen them handle them with like more care and maybe like just see them just a little bit less so that there's like almost like an idolatry like when it comes to the pods.
Nah, I like seeing them because
And I think like just the mystery would have made it spookier. It's like seeing the monster.
I disagree. No,
Yeah,
in this case, I disagree.
I actually like the directness in this film because you know the threat, and the threat is not necessarily the pods, but it's the people that come out of them.
Right, and you don't
You know,
really,
they're just a vessel for the horror of the doppelganger people in the movie already.
and you
know?
you barely see them at all until the greenhouse scene where we do see them forming the doppelgangers, and that scene is great, and at that point,
Oh, yeah.
there's your monster. You've shown your monster. So at that point, why hold back? I wouldn't see the point of going back to the subtlety after that moment, and it is subtle until then. Plus, seeing them in the trucks and all over town is really like the moment of revelation where they realize that this
The
isn't,
scale.
that it isn't just like a self-contained thing that's happened to a couple of people, that at that point the entire town is pretty much already taken over. And I don't think you would have that kind of realization if you didn't just like see the pods everywhere at that
Well,
point.
and the
I'm with that.
directness
I'm
so
with that.
perfectly follows up with like the call that he makes to try to get the governor and
Right.
everyone else, because
he
all
tries
the
to call
full,
the FBI and the phone lines.
yeah, all
they
the
won't
phone
connect.
lines are full, and what that implies to me is that like this isn't just in his town.
Well, I mean, by the end, we do know that it hasn't spread out of his town yet. I think what the phone lines imply is that the operator in his town is a pod
yeah, that's a
person,
good point.
and that she is pretending that the lines are or that nobody is answering, but she's really just not connected.
Because we do get
She
the
doesn't-
exposition that they've landed in that town. So
Yes.
we can
Yeah.
we can deduct that, you know, like they're only just beginning to
Yeah,
spread.
exactly.
And that there is still hope. And
That-
which is why like the end credits music is still generally uplifting, if I remember.
Oh no, I don't think it's
No.
uplifting at all.
Okay, cut that out then. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, it's the music is not particularly grim, but the ending is certainly grim. Because the realization that they're on the highway, they're being shipped out of the town.
But it's not like all is not lost. The threat is still out there,
Well,
but
I mean, like it's much like a Thing ending
Yeah.
in that it's very ambiguous. You don't get to see the outcome, but the outcome is very much left to the imagination.
It's optimistic.
That is not a positive ending, though.
It's optimistic compared to a lot of the bleak endings we get in horror now, but for the 50s, I think that's still a pretty bleak ending. You're right, hope is not necessarily lost because the doctor who he's been talking to the whole time says like, get everybody on the phone, call the army and the FBI and the president and all the police. We gotta shut everything down. And then it cuts over to the protagonist and like we see him like wringing his hair. I guess people are aware of the threat now, but it's not to say that they necessarily have a fighting chance.
Yeah. I like the ambiguity of it. Who knows if that can actually stop them? You know, we
don't know. We don't know how far they've already spread by that point because we see the truck full of them on the highway before he gets picked up. So, like, who knows how many other trucks have been sent out to other towns, whether they've made it. It's the start of the invasion, but, like, it feels like it probably is already too late.
Well, and
especially if you can't
the thing
tell.
is, like,
you can't tell.
on top of
you
that-
don't know who's a fucking commie.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, on top of that,
Sleeper
like,
agents.
this was all set in the 50s, you know, like it's easier to think, oh yeah, with the speed our, you know, society runs
communication,
today, like you could easily stop it with a few phone calls. In the 50s, like it takes a much longer time and a much more coordinated effort.
No answering machines,
much
no
more
text messages.
grim and ambiguous than, you know, if it was set in today's time.
I'm with that.
That's the thing is, I think as many times as this movie has been remade, what is so quintessentially of the era about it is the threat is very particularly bad for the time period, like you said, because you don't have technology, you don't have the benefit of instant communication and like mobilizing everybody from all angles. Like it's a much more insidious threat.
It's true, and also we know for a fact that entire town is lost.
Yeah, for sure.
Like his hometown is gone.
He is the last. Mm-hmm. We for sure see that by the end. He and his girlfriend are the last until she succumbs as well. And that's a good segue into something that I don't know if maybe I missed, and if that's the case, you guys can clarify for me. When his girlfriend becomes a pod person.
Oh man, I had the same. I was going to ask the same thing.
It seems to break its rules, right?
Yes, I was going to ask this. This was like the one note that I was bringing
because
to this.
Like the whole thing is that the pods form while you sleep, and they don't grow if you're awake, and eventually they take your mind, and then your body is disposed of.
And then we never see what happens to the bodies is great.
Right, I love that.
That's great.
We never know what happens. Yeah. But by the end of the movie, it seems as though if you just fall asleep,
near a pod,
then you just wake up and you're a pod person and you're all emotionless and evil now. Because like there are no pods near them when he leaves her in the mine and she falls asleep while he goes out and scouts. Like he comes back to her and all of a sudden she's a pod person. I thought was a little confusing. Did I miss something?
No, not really. The way I read it, and maybe this is just forgiving a plot hole a little bit, is that the doppelgangers were a little more onto them than they thought.
That she was replaced a while ago.
Either that or they knew where she was.
When some of them were running through the mine, they left some pods.
Okay.
Like there were people like in the back of the crowd carrying pods, and they were like Johnny Appleseeding them.
And part of the turning on the radio to get him away may have been a coordinated effort.
That could have been a trap. To lure him away so they could sneak in and place a pod.
Good. I'm glad that can be excused away, because I was going to ask the exact same thing. And because the thing that got me about it is like, how long would you say he's away for?
It seems like only a couple of minutes.
That's
the part. It's probably longer. It's probably supposed to be longer.
If we'd been made to feel like he had been away for just a little bit longer, and there would have been enough time for a bait and switch, with her, because we get the vibe, like because I had that same thought. It's like he goes
outside and comes back in.
Yeah, he walks outside, sees them shipping him. He's like, oh fuck, and you get the assumption that they've broken their own rules, and that she's just fallen asleep and become a pod person, not that she's fallen asleep and been her actual physical body has been replaced.
I would agree to extent. I do like that you don't have to be like asleep for hours. Like you don't have to hit fucking REM sleep to have these things overtake you, Like part of the fear of not falling asleep is very effective because you can only stay up for so long. It's that Nightmare on Elm Street type of thing,
exactly.
Like eventually you're either you have to go to sleep or you're just gonna fall asleep. I
also wonder too, because we see before earlier in the movie that there's an almost finished doppelganger of her already. That's been in the basement. That's been growing while she sleeps. I think it is supposed to take a long time. But it disappears, so we can assume that the doppelganger of her father, who's the one who put it there, moved it. So I'm wondering if once a pod has started to form, it's sort of like psychically latched onto you, if it doesn't matter how far away you are.
Yeah.
It's still there, that connection is still there. So maybe at that point, her just falling asleep for a couple of minutes was enough to finish it off, and then the replica came in and and got rid of her body. Once again, that relies on him being gone for a while, which I think is supposed to be the implication, but the editing does not do a good job of conveying that. I like that we've been able to rationalize it into a way that makes sense.
I think that makes for a saving grace.
I do think that the way it's presented in the movie is a little bit sloppy, because it definitely did give me that moment like, wait, what happened? Like, when did she become a pod person?
Yeah, I think it's neat because, like, while picking that idea apart, we also sort of better establish, like, how kind of perfectly ambiguous the rules are. For as much as is explained to us, there's still a great deal there sort of left under the surface
don't understand.
that shouldn't be explained.
I like that as well, because
I think that ambiguity is good as long as you don't break the few rules that you've established.
Yes.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I definitely think we're being a little forgiving with some of the plot elements, but I think
It's
it
easy
works.
to. It's a good movie.
Well, and the
know?
thing is, it's so ambiguous with that stuff, and it's effective because of the ambiguity in a lot of respects, because, you can never truly tell who's a pod person and who's not. And if we knew, if they did this and this, they would become a pod person.
I do like that he discovers that she's a pod person by kissing her, and he can tell from her kiss that there's no emotion
That
behind
cinematography
it.
is great in that sequence.
I agree. That being said, from a motivation standpoint, I think it's a little bit iffy, because that happens when they are actively running from
Weird time for a makeout.
Right. Well, yeah, they're running and they stumble and fall into the mud, like, while they're fleeing, and then he just starts, like, kissing her neck. And it's like, that's not the time for this. This is definitely not the time.
They're a little, like, they've been popping some miscellaneous uppers and whatnot at that point.
Yeah, probably they've probably been doing meth for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Like, what realistically
some variety of amphetamine for sure.
Well, yeah, and they haven't slept, and so they're not necessarily thinking straight, but it is a little weird in the moment.
It's very weird.
But for that to be the revelation is nice. I'm always a little bit wary of romance plot lines in movies from this era, because they're usually just kind of skeezy.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a little bit of that cultural misogyny of the 50s. It's relatively light in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that the romance plot line is necessary in this film, because it's supposed to represent what they're fighting for, why they don't want to become pod people. Because the part where they're captured in his office and the doppelgangers of his friends are telling him, like it's better, you're not going to have any problems, like, you just fall asleep and then, like, everything's better, we're all one, and it sounds pretty nice, honestly.
Yeah, in 2019, like,
I know, that sounds pretty, I was like,
the premise
yeah.
essentially, it's like, wait, you mean you don't have to feel anymore? Oh, sign me the fuck up.
I'll just become part of a uniform.
No
collective.
Anxiety? Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm in.
No, sign me up.
You mean, like, everyone is actually going to, like, act with a sense of awareness of each other?
Functioning society.
And people won't be mad? Like, yeah, imagine all the people, fam.
This is what
living
John
in the
Lennon
world
was
today.
talking
Let's
about.
do it. Like, I'm here.
Bring in the pod people. Let's start the movement. But her whole thing is like, I would rather die because I don't want to live in a world where there's no love and there's no joy.
If you were going to modernize this movie, I think that would
It has been done.
Well, okay, again, if you were going to, at some point we'll have to watch, but we're watching one of them on the next episode.
We're watching
But there's like
one
four
of
of
the
them,
three
right?
remakes.
Three, yeah. I think it would be a fun play on it to just have, like, a lot of people just kind of want to sign up. Like, because, like, yeah, you could stop it, like, with social media from spreading, but if people want it to spread, like, kind of changes the whole game. I don't know.
I don't know, because like
that's been done in alien invasion movies, where there's people who work with the aliens because they think it's better, and they're usually portrayed as evil.
Oh yeah, and they inevitably get, like,
greedy.
ripped apart at the end. Of
Right.
course.
yeah,
of course.
well, and the thing about it too is, like, your brain may get transferred, but your consciousness may not.
It's true. The odds are high that you're not on the other side when the coin flips.
That idea has been already somewhat modernized with technology and like the idea of uploading your consciousness to a computer.
Oh yeah, shout out to the game Selma on that. That's one of the best examples of that I've seen.
Really uploading your consciousness, or is it just creating a copy of your consciousness and that you, the consciousness occupying your body, will actually die? Like,
right, exactly. That's the coin flip premise.
That defeats the purpose, right?
I love that so much. Yeah, and again, like that's another great example of how this concept, like this specific film, can be recontextualized, today into something that's still quite terrifying.
You could modernize it in such a way that it's not even like an alien threat. It's people being uploaded into androids.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But
and if the same effect.
I think part of the reason it works though is because you're so unsure of like the rules of stuff.
Right.
Where like with androids, where you would have that to an extent, it would be a little trickier. Just because...
It all depends on how much you would explain in the film. I think overall...
But it's like there are plenty of films that have also done that with like downloading your consciousness and whatnot that are terrible movies.
That like this concept is very timeless.
Yeah, totally.
Because at its core, it's about what is the self and the individual versus the collective.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And I think that works regardless of the time period. And, it's funny, we didn't have a remake of this wholesale this decade or in the 80s, but we had one in the 70s, the 90s, and the 2000s.
I would say that the first remake that we're going to talk about next week, you could consider a film of either the 70s or the 80s or both, because it came out in 79, so it's like right on the cusp.
And like the premise of The Thing, like John Carpenter's The Thing, is pretty close. It's a doppelganger.
That's based on a film that came out before this, based on a book or a novella that came out before that.
Right.
Also,
my point being, like we got
check out our Thing
something.
Episode.
Yeah, check out our birthday anniversary episode from last year in which we discussed The Thing and The Thing and The Thing from Another World.
Yeah.
Wish I'd been there for that one.
The Thing from
love
Another
that.
World.
I love The Thing so much. That's one of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah, The Thing from Another World, not very good.
But yeah, I think you have kind of a good point there because conceptually they're similar.
Just the premise of like the coin flip.
I definitely think in some ways Carpenter was inspired by this film.
For sure. But it's sort of a theme that you see in stories just like throughout time as well, the idea of doppelgangers. And I think that as humans, we're sort of inherently pack animals, there's I think sort of a subconscious like lizard brain fear about not being able to trust members of your own pack, that they might be a threat in disguise. So that's why you see throughout history, and especially throughout film history, this same kind of story being retold so many times. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Thing, but even stuff like about serial killers, not being able to trust your neighbor.
If I can use this review to plug another movie, I do have to recommend people go out and watch the movie Seconds. I see it as kind of a sister film to this. It's all about a guy who gets in a terrible accident and his brain is put in another person's body. And so he gets to experience the life of another. It's kind of the idea of what is the self.
Oh, it's like RoboCop.
It's very simple.
It is. It's like RoboCop.
except a flesh robot. So like,
aren't we all just flesh robots?
Exactly. I think this movie, a lot of its shortcomings are negated just because conceptually it works so well.
Absolutely. We've mentioned a few of its problems, but overall, they're not terrible in the grand scheme of things. I still think that the good things in the movie far outweigh my few gripes with it. The script is like really tight. It's paced really well. Stylistically, it's awesome. The effects are hit or miss. Like you said, Cleve, I wish the pods had some more weight to them when they were carrying them around so they're not tossing them around like balloons. That being said, the greenhouse scene when the pods are like forming new people, the effects in that scene are dope.
There's like one bad shot of the protagonist where like he just looks like a puppet mannequin.
Yeah.
But you know what is really great? The bubbles.
Yeah.
Like dissipating and seeing like the wife's face.
The foam, yeah.
Like, great. just great because you it's so abstract at first and you can't make out what it is, and then as
It
the
adds-
bubbles pop, you can just, as the foam dissipates, you start to see and you realize there's a face there.
Also,
it's
a result of budgetary limitations in the positive too, because I think they could have made it much more elaborate. But because it's so simple as an effect.
The foam is such a nice touch because it has the practical use of hiding the shortcomings of the actual props. And also, it makes the effect feel more tactile when you're watching it. Even though it's an image that you're just watching on a screen, you know what that would feel like if you were to touch it. It's like why in The Thing they cover everything in slime. Why that's such a big horror thing is making things slimy.
If you get a horror puppet, you got to put some slime on it.
Absolutely.
That's just common knowledge.
The choice to go with foamy bubbles instead of slime, which would have been, I think, the go-to. Really nice touch. I like it.
Another plus when it comes to the pods themselves, which also alternate idea for a name for the podcast.
The pods themselves.
I would love to know what color the pods actually were, because they really do feel vibrantly green.
They do feel green, don't they?
And there were some really cool tricks that they played up around that era to paint things odd colors to make them feel like something else in black and white. And I would kill to know what color those pods are actually.
That's a great point, because it's something I don't think about when I'm watching the film, but they do distinctly look green, don't they? Mm-hmm. And it's black and white. That's such a great trick. It tricks your brain into thinking I would not have thought about that at all if you hadn't brought it up.
Yeah, it's
great point.
It's the kind of shit that keeps me up at night because I'm weird. But just to put a little cap on my complaint from the beginning about having to be more mysterious with the pods, I really do think just my issue is just seeing them look so light. And artificial, and if there'd been some fluid,
it's the weight. They look. I think they look good. It's just the lack of weight that makes them feel like a problem.
Yeah, because whenever people pick them up or whatever, there's no movement or anything. They just feel very
it's like they're holding a balloon
or a foam toy.
It doesn't feel like they're straining or that the pods have any kind of movement of their own, like you said.
But
I would imagine they'd be fleshy. Yeah, I think I think the benefit is that they look good. If they looked bad and also didn't have any weight,
yeah.
Okay, one of the last things I want to talk about is, how do you guys feel about Kevin McCarthy?
The lead?
Yes, who plays Miles.
I think that he sounds great. When he's not talking, he looks great. I had a problem.
Why don't you think he looks good when he's talking, Cleveland?
Oh, because I brought it up at the beginning of the film and cursed all of you. Again, my apologies on that. I think he does a bang-up job, frankly. But there's a weird thing I noticed. Whenever he talks, his upper lip doesn't move. And it got me throughout the rest of the film.
It kind of looks like Peter Fonda with a splash of Bell's palsy.
Yeah.
Oh, yikes.
Just
I don't disagree, but yikes.
Slight facial paralysis, particularly in his upper lip.
Yeah,
just the upper lip. The rest of his face is quite emotive. But he keeps his mouth over his teeth, and I don't know why, and I couldn't not notice it after I saw it. So sorry for cursing all of you, but
did.
It is, and again, that is not even an actual complaint. At all.
I should say Henry Fonda more than Peter Fonda.
Okay,
he has that very old school look, which I think works well, and I think he's fairly expressive in this role. To the
especially
benefit.
at the beginning of the end,
I think he's pretty good. Most of my problems with him as a character more just come from how he's written, less than the performance.
Yeah.
I think he's overall written pretty well. Just a little bit of the misogyny I could do without.
Oh God, yeah, always. My last note is similar, but it's not just limited to him. There are several moments where the collective protagonists make some extremely poor decisions, and it kind of had me shouting at the screen a little bit. And it's the 50s, and I'm willing to forgive a lot. But when you have your 4 friends you've verified are not pod people, because the pod people of them are growing in front of you,
right?
Kill the pods in front of you, and that's fine if they don't. Yeah,
no, they do kill the pods.
That's right. The protagonist doesn't want to kill the one that looks like his wife at first, but then does anyway.
His girlfriend. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Which is a big point. But
she's just come back from London.
When you have a small collective. There were 4 of you, and all 4 of you know at that moment you're not pod people. Why would you ever let them out of your sight?
Right.
Why would you do that? That's really dumb.
Well, yeah, because the next...
Like, that is idiocy. Like, oh, get to the next town. You do not know if the next town is safe or not. And it's like, oh, well, if we can't go, who's going to go? I don't know. All of you go. Go together. Because, what are you doing? Because the next time... There is an answer to this.
Because after that, the next time we see King Donovan, he is a pod person.
Right. And, of course, like, that serves the plot.
Right, you have to get
you
him.
Need to have the friend who becomes that, and like for horror's sake.
Kevin McCarthy needs to be the last man.
But like, can't you have like the pod people split them up or something? Like, I didn't like that they split up
because
of like a dumb decision.
You want to have the characters try to contact the authorities as well to try to get a sense of the scope and to like try to show that they're heroic and trying to stop it, not just run away from it.
Yes. Right, and they do. I think they do that pretty well.
But it's that balancing ground between keeping that and not doing the dumb decision of splitting up.
That's the thing.
The car can fit 4 people. There's really no reason.
Trying to contact the authorities, good decision, makes sense. Splitting up, bad decision, doesn't make sense.
And like, the problem is it's our protagonist's final choice. It's not the writer friend. It's not him saying like, oh, fuck all this, me and my wife are out of here, and then the protagonist being like, wait, no, we shouldn't split up because that's dumb.
Yeah,
and
we don't get that. He tells them to
our
leave.
hero makes the dumb decision. Like, the writer friend could have done it, and I wouldn't have had anywhere near as much of a problem.
Yeah,
because then it's like, cool, he deserves to become a doppelganger. Well, I think there are plenty of solutions for it, but it's a small thing.
It's a selfless act. It may be a stupid act, but it does make the lead character seem a little more heroic. Just in that, like...
He still has work to do, but he wants to get his friends out safe.
Yeah. And it
like,
plays
you
into
go,
that
I'll meet up with you. I have to go do something.
I have to be hero man.
Into that doctor role as well, because he feels like he needs to fix the issues, in spite of himself. It's very selfless.
I feel that.
But I do think it is a dumb decision.
It's classic horror movie stupid decision.
Yeah. And it's the 50s. It's long before like splitting up bad was a trope. But I mean, survivalistically, like that's all way like throughout human history, that's been a trope. Like that's been a bad idea.
The last thing I want to talk about is the ending. I want to speculate on what kind of effect it had in the 50s when people went and saw this in the theaters. So the film ends with our protagonist running on the highway, trying to stop people on the road. He's just seen a truck full of the pods leaving, and he's screaming, "You're in danger! You're in danger!" And then he looks right into the camera and yells, "They're already here! You're next!" Which, in hindsight, very campy, very fun. I love it. It's a great touch.
Yeah.
But I bet there were some people in 1956 who walked out of this movie after that and were like, oh my God.
Yeah, just scared as shit.
Shit, like going home, like giving their husband the side eye on the way home. Like,
I mean, we're talking about the same like era where like Orson Welles did the War of the Worlds like radio show and people threw themselves out of fucking windows. So,
fun fact, that story
probably
is highly exaggerated. Yeah. There's a great Radio Lab episode about it where they get into numbers and specific stuff.
Did anyone throw? All I need is like 2 people to throw themselves out of a window for that point to stand.
No confirmed suicide.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for correcting me on that. Feel free to leave that in.
It's it's a common thing. I would say go listen to the Radio Lab episode if you're curious. It's interesting.
Shout out to Radio Lab.
But I just think that ending this movie like that in the time, like when the Cold War is like really ramping up and people are already scared of like communist sleeper cells, to directly address the audience and your protagonist saying, they're already here, you're next. I bet there were for sure some middle-aged 50s ass housewives who went home and laid directly on their fainting couch. I bet
it's accurate. I definitely can see it.
I bet it rustled some jimmies. I bet
Jimmy's were sufficiently rusty.
I bet people were walking around giving their neighbors the side eye, being a little bit more mistrustful. I don't know. The rubes, of course.
No, it's a very Orwellian concept. Like,
it's
1984 has that same like play at paranoia with like the kids turning in their families and stuff. Spooky shit, man.
Tried and true themes. Mm-hmm. They endure throughout time.
One important note is the score is excellent, but I just absolutely have to mention that the composer's name is, get this, Carmen Dragon.
Carmen Dragon.
Carmen Dragon.
Oh man, yeah, that was so good.
That's a great name. Holy shit.
Carmen Dragon did a bang up job.
Yeah, good job, Carmen Dragon. Thank you. We'll never forget.
With the last name Dragon, you can give
do
a
anything.
bad first name.
Yeah.
That's a powerful name.
If your last name is Dragon, you can do anything you want in life.
Yeah, straight up.
I'm jealous. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go ahead and rate. Ben, why don't you start?
Sure. Well, not to sound like a heretic on a show called Pod People, I love this movie. I think it's great. I don't think it's a 5-star for me, unfortunately. But it is a solid 4-star movie. I think conceptually it's a 5-star. Execution-wise, it might not get to those highs, but it's still an excellent watch, and I think it's required viewing for horror fans.
Largely ditto on that. I just had a couple of complaints, but they're all minor and largely can be justified and are more personal preferences than anything else. But it's my personal rating. I'm going to give it a 4.5. First off, just for posterity, No, just also like I love classic horror. It's what I grew up on. It's a film I'd always needed to see, and now I know why.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite horror films of the time. I think it's still pretty relevant today. There are definitely things about it that are campy, just because the 50s were kind of inherently campy.
Half the things that are campy are fun, and
I
that's
agree.
again a saving grace.
I agree. I enjoy this film a lot. It definitely has a small handful of problems. I don't think it's a perfect film, but it's a great film from the 50s, and just a solid watch all around. And if you're a fan of classic horror, I agree. I think it's a must watch. It's going to be a 4 for me as well, which will give us an average of 4.2 out of 5 pods for Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956. And I think I saw on the sponsor shelf...
Oh, fuck. I mean, yeah, of course.
Yeah, don't swear at the sponsor shelf, Cleve.
I wouldn't dream of it.
I've already seen what happens.
I saw that we, in honor of this film, we got a special 1950s themed sponsor.
Boy, howdy, didn't we just?
Here's the copy, Cleveland. Why don't you read this for us?
Thank you. Yeah, of course, our 1950s themed sponsor.
Have you ever been watching a horror movie and you're and been worried about having a stroke? Well, worry no longer with oscilloscope's patented oscillonopes. Put them over your eyes and never be scared again with oscilloscope's patented oscillonopes. They sure as the bee's knees, they work out the heart disease. One time I was watching Bride of Frankenstein, and I started to smell burning toast. And I quickly put on my oscilloscope's oscillonopes and stroked that stroke right out of town. Thanks, oscillostrokes. It does say that oscilloscope's oscillonopes are built or hand woven out of the finest asbestos. So they're so effective. That's heavy duty stuff. Yeah.
Well, wow, what a fantastic sponsor. I am seeing now, looking at the copy, that they are only paying us what they would pay in the 50s. So I'm afraid that we're only making about $17 off of this. total.
Are we getting like a percentage of sales or anything? No, that's it. Just
No.
$17.
They don't sell these anymore, Cleveland. They went out of business in 1963.
Hey, well, maybe they make some collectible items.
To eBay.
Yeah, let us go.
All right, well, that'll bring us to the end of this episode. Next week, the body snatching continues, and we'll be talking about the first remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
That's right. We're gonna watch Snatch by Guy Ritchie.
That's right, that is the first one. We'll be watching and discussing Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1979. I'm very excited for this one.
Me too.
I love this movie. So check back with us next week if you want to join in on the spooky fun. But until then, it would be a fantastic birthday present to us if you went on down to Apple Podcasts and left us a 5-star rating and a nice review and wish us a happy birthday and tell us why you like the show and what movies do you want us to talk about. Hit us up on Twitter at PodPeoplePod, and you can tweet directly at us. You can also follow us on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod for a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. Check out our birthday episode from last year if you haven't listened to it. As Ben mentioned earlier, we were talking The Thing, and it was a good time.
Yeah.
You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome.
I'm at Mr. Sheets on Twitter.
And I'm occasionally tweeting for Light Arc Studio as we continue to develop our wonderful, wonderful horror indie game, It Stares Back. Check it out. Get it in early access. It's there on Steam. You know what to do.
Only $6 for now. Well, thank you as always for listening. Check back next week. The invading continues. But until next time, I'm going to go drift off to sleep and maybe awaken in a fresh body.
I'm going
with
to get back
fewer
into my
problems.
pod.
Dream a little dream.